Ottawa unveiled what vaccine mandates will look like for federal public servants and Canadian travelers.
For the vast majority of people, the rules are very simple. To travel, you've got to be vaccinated.
A political response that could pose political risk for the official opposition, a party that never confirmed the vaccination status of its candidates. Now, Conservative MP-elects are trying to figure out the way forward for their party and their leader.
We are united. We have a process in our party that will respect one another.
So what are the politics of these vaccine mandates? It's Thursday. I'm here with that issue. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. So there were a couple of things happening this week, whether it be the government's messaging around this announcement, policy that they put forward during the election, obviously, and then Aaron O'Toole surviving his first caucus meeting. Let's start with the first part of that, Chantal, because they are, I think, linked a little bit politically too. What is the advantage here for the government and potentially the risk for the opposition?
Advantage to the government. Justin Trudeau campaigned on this, so it's not as if he could just decide the day after that it's of no import to him. The NDP and the Bloc Québécois, for the most part, are on board. Mm-hmm. So this puts the issue back on the Conservative front step because it's the only party about which we do not know and no one knows whether all candidates who were elected were vaccinated, fully vaccinated. So two issues. The first, obviously, is if you're going to come from far away, you're not going to be able to get to Parliament Hill if you're not vaccinated and you're an MP. And then the second issue is there will be a debate in Parliament, in the House of Commons, over making sure that every MP is vaccinated. The majority will vote yay. And it's going to be interesting to watch whether there are Conservatives who want to argue parliamentary privilege over this. It's not an issue that Aaron O'Toole wants to star in.
No, and not necessarily because Conservatives are against the vaccine, but there are Conservatives who don't believe they should have to share personal information. They want to keep things private. Andrew, does that seem to you telling in any way of how Aaron O'Toole will lead the party if he continues to lead the party? It looks for now like he will. What does that tell you about how he will do that?
Well, it certainly adds more difficulty for him. It shouldn't. It's the right thing to do. It's wildly popular. This ought to be a simple entrance requirement, for the party to be taken seriously as a potential government. If you cannot address this in the middle of a public health emergency, then you just look like fools. The difficulty for him is he's in a very weakened position now. He's got a base in his party that's furious with him, not just for losing the election, but for basically pulling a bait and switch in the leadership race, where he ran as one candidate and then materialized in a completely different leader once he was elected. You've got a caucus that is prepared to leave him in place for now, but is increasingly showing signs of independence, and it will be harder than you might imagine for him to crack the whip on them. Oftentimes that's a good thing, but in this particular issue, as I say, the common sense has to prevail. And you've got a still active and indeed emboldened People's Party. We'll have to see whether the People's Party continues to be a force in Canadian politics after this last election. They had the vaccine mandate issue given to them. But what this signals is the Liberals have lots of ammunition in ways in which they can stoke up the People's Party going forward, not just over vaccine mandates, but over things like guns or immigration, et cetera. And that's also going to be a real test for Aaron O'Toole and for the Conservative Party.
Althea, you wrote about these two issues this week.
Yeah, I would say it's to complete, I think, Andrew's thought. It's not just that the People's Party might be emboldened by this issue, but it's actually Conservative Party members might be emboldened by this issue. So if Conservative Party members who are, anti-vaccine mandate decide to show up in force at the party convention in 2023, if that is actually the date that they're going to keep, then Aaron O'Toole is in really big trouble because it will be really hard for him to hang on to that leadership. But at the moment, the fight is really over whether or not members of Parliament in the House of Commons need to be vaccinated. And that debate is happening behind closed doors at the moment at the Board of Internal Economy. And the Conservatives there actually seem to want to have a compromise position with the Liberals. But even if they get a compromise position, if it's the continuation of a hybrid parliament where if you're not fully vaxxed, you can participate in a hybrid format, you can be rest assured that there are certainly some Conservative MPs who will want to come and participate in a debate and wave their hand and say, wait a second, my privilege as a member is being encumbered. I should be allowed to come here if I want to. And this is exactly what the Liberals actually want to happen. Sure. They want to see that fight happen for Aaron. And Aaron O'Toole certainly doesn't want to see that happen because he has now this caucus where we know actually that there are members that are not fully vaccinated. He needs to balance those views. And he tried to say this week that he didn't have a sort of Damocles hanging over his head. But now that caucus has actually voted to give themselves the power to call for a leadership vote against him, he certainly has a sort of Damocles hanging over his head. So he's in a really tough and uncomfortable spot.
Yeah. And it's not just that vote. The other thing that happened at that caucus meeting was the election of a new caucus chair in Scott Reid, who ran on a platform of basically converting the caucus into something resembling the 1922 committee, the UK, very powerful backbench group in the UK. He's talking about, turning caucus meetings into real meetings with real rules of order, et cetera, that can't just be effortlessly dominated by the leader and his retainers. So there's big things happening within the Conservative caucus right now.
Okay, last word to you, Chantal, then I need to change topics quickly.
Small word of caution. It is dangerous to, as the NDP has shown over the Thomas Mulcair episode, it is really dangerous to exert your power when you don't have a roadmap to where it will lead you. And I don't think that that caucus can stay united and wave goodbye to Aaron O'Toole.
Okay, quickly, I want you to weigh in on the Prime Minister's first public appearance since this Tofino trip last Thursday and his chance to apologize or to express regret for his decision to travel on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Here he is.
It was a mistake to travel on that day. This is an important moment for Canada and for Canadians to reflect not just on the past, but on the present. I was in error.
Althea, what did you make of the apology? Is that enough, or has he potentially damaged things for himself?
I don't know if he's going to wear it for a lot longer. I think it confirms a lot of opinions that people already have about the Prime Minister. I think it harms a lot of the goodwill that he had built with Indigenous communities. I think it will be, up to them, frankly, to forgive him if they choose to do so. I also, though, think that it gives Mark Miller, should he remain the minister in charge of this file, more leeway to actually demand more things from cabinet and this Prime Minister. I think that is where he has shown a big judgment gap, and perhaps there will be more money and more impetus on that devrology that we used to hear about in the first mandate to actually get things on that file accomplished. I think they get a further imperative on that front.
Andrew?
Well, if the only thing we can say is that this simply confirms a previous pattern of saying one thing and doing another, of utter carelessness and fecklessness, I guess that saves his bacon, is that expectations have been lowered so much. But when you look at the reaction to this, I mean, some of his followers online would like you to believe this is all just got up by the media. I don't think they've actually been reading the media, because what you will see in the media is a parade of different Indigenous groups and Indigenous leaders, all of them quite furious with him on this, because it was really a snub on a very important day, maybe not an intended snub, but a snub nevertheless. And it has caused him a lot of loss of goodwill with them, and we'll see how he rebuilds it over time.
Chantal, last word to you.
Well, you spend 6 years convincing Canadians that an issue is important, and then you do this. I guess if you were looking for a silver lining, you'd say mission accomplished. A lot of people who were not Indigenous thought, what in the world could this be? But I agree that there's a solid core of Liberal members or Liberal partisans who seem to think that it's okay to just say something as long as you don't have to act on it.
I think the reality is there is a systemic problem with the treatment of women, the treatment of sexual harassment in the Canadian Armed Forces. It is clear that there is a toxic culture there, and it is clear to our government, as the Prime Minister said, that needs to change, and it will.
That was the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, talking about sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces. This after we learned of the appointment and then removal of Major General Peter Daw from managing the sexual misconduct file, even though Daw had previously provided a positive character reference to an officer who was convicted of sexually assaulting another soldier. The Prime Minister also weighed in, saying he was dismayed by that decision and the military, quote, just doesn't get it when it comes to this issue. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea all here for an extended round of the panel. I mean, you could have played that clip, a very similar clip from 6 months ago, a year ago, with the government saying the exact same thing. Yes, they've put people in place to review things like Louise Arbour, but at some point, the military doesn't get it. That can't be the government response, can it? I mean, at some point, something has to move here. Andrew, you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, whoever's been the government for the last 6 years should really be held to account for this. It isn't just that we could have heard this a month or 6 months ago. We could have heard this 6 years ago. And indeed, we did have a very substantial report issued at that time that sat on a shelf. So they're absolutely right to say, and we've seen repeated evidence of this when the people appointed within the military to actually get to the bottom of this turn out to be part of the problem. But at the top of that pile, there sits a defense minister and there sits a prime minister who have responsibility. The Army is not some independent thing that's off, not even part of the government. It is ultimately answerable to the government, to the civilian power. And they have dropped the ball on this as well as the military has.
Does this indicate that Harjit Sajjan's days as defense minister are coming to a swift end, do you think, Chantal?
That we are asking ourselves the question shows the magnitude of the problem going all the way to the top, because this is a minister who has lost the confidence of the opposition parties, who, for right or for wrong reasons, is not being able to effect change in the military. I think if the next cabinet features the same Minister of National Defense, it will become the top item in that shuffle, and not for the right reasons. Now, all that being said, what happened this week means, yes, there is need for a fresh broom as Minister of National Defense, and who that person is has to be someone who has clout and influence, not just with the armed forces, that seems hard, but also with the Prime Minister.
And that person, I would think, Althea, would have sort of big expectations then, because if we are saying that Harjit Sajjan is responsible for not doing enough, then this next person's going to have to try and get an awful lot done inside, as Chrystia Freeland rightly points out, a culture that is broken when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to read that new mandate letter. I think this absolutely guarantees that Harjit Sajjan is no longer the defense minister. If I was a gambling person, which I am not, but I would probably bet on Anita Anand. So if I was her, I probably would take serious doubt if I want to take this job or not. I also think the other thing's going to happen is there is going to have to be a lot of senior changes in the forces themselves at the top of the leadership and in the department. I'd be surprised to see the DM, Jodie Thomas, stay. But, maybe they keep her because she's a woman. But unfortunately, I think the message is they need to clean house completely. And the military, unlike most other departments, actually does have a culture of operating kind of outside of the sphere. And what this has shown is that the PMO and the political center needs to pay a lot closer attention than what's going on.
And would because I've heard that name bounced around too. I wonder, would a woman, a female chief of the defense staff, I mean, certainly it would have been symbolic, which is something this government likes, but would it actually result in change? I don't know. Andrew?
Well, as the minister, not as the chief.
I'm sorry. As the minister. Yes, my apologies. Yes, Andrew.
Other things being equal, it would certainly send a signal, but you also need someone of whatever gender who can crack the whip and get things done. And that will depend in some respects on the nature of the person involved. And it will also require that he or she have the full backing of the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Harjit Sajjan, yes, he's dropped the ball on his job, but he, was in communication with and kicked the ball to, in many respects, to the Prime Minister's office on the Jonathan Vance business. Mm-hmm. And we know that nothing happened in the Prime Minister's office either.
Last word to you, Chantal.
And that's why clout with the Prime Minister is a qualification, male or female. there has been no political will off the top. That report 6 years ago that narrated all of that was on Justin Trudeau's desk. And I have seen no mandate letter to his defense minister that spoke about it. So at some point, you have to think if the buck stops with Trudeau and with whoever he decides to appoint in that portfolio. And I'll have you note that no one is lobbying behind the scenes to get that job, which is very telling.
No, that's not
That
one.
and Minister of Immigration, I think.
Okay, thank you all. Appreciate that. We'll leave it there. Thanks.